guys, my name is Dr. Lee Nagel, and I've been asked by your teacher, Mr. Summer, to speak to you on nutrition and cell function, and both of these subjects happen to be my expertise. Now, we did this last year with, I think, maybe 3 or 4 different times through the day, and this year I'm a little short on time. So I'm just going to record this short video and then, send it to Mr. Summer, and then, the nice thing is you guys will be able to rewind it, and if you miss some of the information and whatnot. So, but I'm going to start with a question. How many of you want to grow up and get cancer? So raise your hand. I got the lady behind the camera raising her hand. How many of you want to grow up and have a heart attack? Or have diabetes? Or be obese? Now raise your hand. How many of you would like to avoid that? So, most people, when they think about growing up in retirement, being a grandparent, they don't think about all the things that our modern elderly are dealing with. So, most people think retirement, they're going to have money, they're going to go on vacations, they're going to spend time with their grandkids, but they don't think about the disease. So our average retiree is on 6 different meds. They're in and out of hospitals, just dealing with disease. And most people, if they knew how to do it, would like to avoid that. So in America, we feel like we're the best at everything. And you know what? We're the best at a lot of things. Like in medicine, we're the best at crisis care. So if you get hit by a bus, this is the best country to be in. But what we're really bad at is chronic disease, like cancer and heart disease and diabetes. When you look at all the countries in the world, we're ranked 42nd. So there are third world countries that are much healthier than us. So my point of that is, if you're pretty much average, if your lifestyle, the way you eat, think, and move, is pretty much like everybody else, and we're the 42nd worst country, and Indiana's one of the sickest states in that country. So if you're pretty much average in Indiana, your retirement is going to be full of disease. So my point to that is these diseases are very, very preventative. You can prevent all these diseases with how you, for the most part, with how you eat, think, and move. So in this clinic, I'm a chiropractor by training, by education. Can you see that? Mm-hmm. But we're also experts in nutrition, reversing diabetes, teaching people how to lose weight, how to cook food, how to shop. That's what we do at True Weight Loss Solutions. And then 2 days a week, I'm a different type of doctor. I'm a functional medicine doctor, which we look at toxicity issues. And I'm going to show you there are toxicity issues that are environmental, that have to do with heavy metals and plastics and things like that. But today I'm going to talk to you about the food components of that. And we have to address those components when we're dealing with patients that have autoimmunity, autism, dementia, thyroid problems, you name it. This is what retirees are dealing with. We have to address those toxicity issues, and I'm going to cover 2 of them today. So sugar and bad fats. So do you guys think that we need help? That we need to do something different? So I want you to think about that. If you're doing the same thing that your grandparents did, nobody's going to come save you. You don't have special genes, you're going to get disease. So if you're not standing out, if you're not doing something different, you're going to get sick. The great thing is, you guys are 12, 13, 14 years old. You have a lot of time to change those lifestyles. And when you do that, you can change your family. So I'm going to approach this both from a cell function standpoint, chemistry standpoint, and then I'm actually fortunate that I deal with patients. So I actually see it not only from the science side, but actually have the experience to how to get people better. So I'm telling you, this stuff works. So diabetes is an epidemic. Where does diabetes come from? Well, it comes from toxicity, some of those trans fats we're going to talk about. The major thing is sugar. Sugar and lack of exercise. So now 1 in 3 children are going to have diabetes. We have a really big problem. I'm going to talk about how that happens at a cell function level. All right? Environmental toxins. So this is a slide on environmental toxins. I'm going to show you how that You're learning about the cell, how that has an impact on the cell membrane, which actually affects the entire body. So what this shows is, as soon as you're born, you're exposed to 287 of the 413 toxic chemicals that they study. But we're actually exposed to about 80,000 chemicals. So in the last 100 years, when you see all these people getting cancer and all these diseases that they didn't get before, we've never had a bigger exposure to toxins as far as food and environment as we are now. So once again, I'm not going to talk about the environmental toxins, but I'm going to talk about the food toxins. And the reason this is so important, and it's such a great thing that Mr. Summer had me do this, is the food is something that you can control, and it's a very powerful component, where sometimes you're exposed to environmental toxins and you can't really control that. So cancer rates have risen in children 67%. So I present these slides, I can present slides like this all day showing how we're getting sicker. The point is there's a real purpose behind what Mr. Summer's teaching you and having me bring to you. It's so that you can live a longer and healthier life. So the world needs changing. So here we go, we're gonna dig in to this cell function stuff. So the body's made of cells, you guys have learned that. So would it make sense that the health of the cell determines the health of the body? So if this cell isn't healthy, your body's not healthy. But what most people don't understand is that the health of the cell membrane determines the health of the cell, therefore determining the health of the body. So I'm going to draw this. I'm not sure what my next slide is, but we're going to look. So inflammation. Okay. So here we go. Are you on me here? Mm-hmm. So this is the cell. All right? So, what's the cell membrane made of? I don't know if you guys learned this or not, but it's called a lipid bilayer. It's made of fat. What's attracted to fat? Toxins. So this is bi meaning to. So it's a lipid bilayer, and this is like the gatekeeper in the cell. It lets things in and out. All right? So you have nutrients in. And waste coming out. So the food comes in, and the waste goes out. So a healthy cell membrane allows for this nutrition waste thing, just like we think of eating food and then going to the bathroom. Right? So inside this cell, we have our DNA in the nucleus. So these are our genetics. You also have things called mitochondria. And I'm not sure if you guys are learning this stuff, but this is like the battery pack in a cell. All right, this is what powers everything. The mitochondria uses a substance called ATP. It's a little energy nugget. And the DNA, that's your genetics, and your genetics determine how the cell is going to function. So this cell membrane plays a huge part of that. The other thing that happens is you have receptors on the cell membrane. And these receptors receive hormones. So the hormones might be serotonin. So you know how actually you get a serotonin and dopamine release a lot of times when you check social media, which is why it's so addictive. It's kind of, and you get that when you have sugar and when you do cocaine. So these things are all like highly addictive chemicals, and then the social media produces that. You know how every time you hear the ding and you want to go on, increases dopamine. So dopamine, serotonin is also a feel-good hormone. It could be insulin, which is going to be directly tied to sugar. So these things, they need to be, for this cell to work like it's supposed to, those hormones have to be able to get into the cell. But what's interesting, if we go to this next slide, some of the foods that we choose, like bad fats and sugars, actually cause inflammation of the cell. So they cause it like this. So all of a sudden, these hormones aren't working. So these two hormones, So I picked these 3 hormones because that's what affects kids a lot. So this is when you feel depressed, it's not working, right? Serotonin, you don't feel good. Insulin isn't working and it makes you gain weight, and it also causes cancer and heart disease. So this is bigger, much bigger than just a weight thing, which is an epidemic right now in children. A big part of it's food. So it causes inflammation of the cell, which inflammation is at the root of all chronic disease, and then it changes how this DNA functions. So the DNA gets a bunch of inflammation in here, and this DNA has to actually survive or change, and sometimes it turns on diabetes, right? You can turn genes on and off. You're not just like programmed no matter what. My parents had depression, so I'm depressed, or my parents are overweight, so I'm overweight. That's not how it works. Those genes get turned on from toxicity and turned off when you clean things up. So no matter what your parents do, you can change your outcome. So that's how this affects those genetics, all right? So that's the science behind it. Now let's dig into the cell function, all right? And the food. So this is a slide showing the exact same stuff. So these are different hormones. This is a slide I use when we're, helping patients with diabetes, or we're doing a lecture on thyroid problems or whatever, but it's the same thing. The insulin applies to you guys, the serotonin and dopamine, how you feel. The sex hormones that drive puberty, like estrogen and testosterone, play a role too. So, here's your mitochondria and here's your DNA. So what I want you to understand is every food that you eat becomes energy for that cell through this Krebs cycle. Now this is biochemistry stuff. I think in maybe freshman biology, you start learning about the Krebs cycle. It's pretty it's pretty complicated. Most doctors don't even totally understand the Krebs cycle, or they don't have it memorized. But food is broken down into 3 groups. You have carbohydrates, which are like breads, pastas, anything sugary, your processed foods, crackers, things like that. You have fats, and then you have proteins, which is like meat. Sometimes there's proteins in nuts, things like that. But all of them have a pathway that they give that cell energy. All right? So, we have different energies. So glucose comes from grain. And glucose is like rocket fuel. Like it just burns really fast. If you eat a pancake, it turns into sugar before it's hit your stomach from the enzymes in your mouth. So it just spikes that sugar. And then fat becomes a ketone. It's much harder to burn, but once you burn it, it's a really clean burning fuel. It's much healthier to burn fat than it is glucose. So if you look over here, these little dots that I'm drawing, this is what actually happens when you burn, sugar, is it pollutes the cell and causes cellular inflammation. What feeds cancer? Sugar. Can cancer feed on fat? No, it can't. So when we have a diet where we eat cereal in the morning, sandwiches at lunch, pasta at dinner, snacking on chips, that's sugar, sugar, sugar all day, and really feeds these diseases and causes this cellular inflammation of the cell membrane. All right? So this slide shows you carbohydrates are sugar. So if you eat a piece of bread, that's sugar. Right? If you eat a roll, that's sugar. If you eat pasta, that's sugar. So the American diet is overwhelmingly loaded with carbohydrates, which is a big part of why we're so sick, why we come in 42nd. I would rather come in first. With all of our technology and information, we should be first, but we're 42nd. So if you look at these drinks, one of the huge sources of sugar that people don't even think about is what they're drinking. Even sports drinks. You drink Gatorade. It's marketed as being healthy because it's tied with sports. It's just sugar. Drink orange juice in the morning. It's just sugar. You might as well start your day out with a soda. I mean, soda has some other things that make it worse, but it's sugar all day. And you can see the amounts of sugar, obviously none with water, but then you have, all these different juices. Iced tea, you think, oh, that's a healthier alternative. It's basically soda. So juice and soda, same thing. And our genetics have been the same for a long time, tens of thousands of years. We have hunter-gatherer genes. We are not designed to drink soda or eat sugar. It's just not part of our genome, which is why it causes so much disease. Our God-given genetics are healthy, and we eat foods from the earth, animals, so meat, healthy meat, salads, vegetables, fruits, things like that. We don't have any problems. If you think about the grain, we had corn plants and wheat plants, but we didn't have fields of wheat, fields of corn. That happened about, in the last 6,000 years or so, and that's when we started getting diabetes recorded too. So, we know that science, that if you eat a lot of grain and sugar, you're gonna get diabetes, and we know it feeds cancer and it also causes blood vessel damage, so leading to heart disease. So sugar's bad, but I'm gonna reiterate this point. When you're thinking, if you wanna get healthier, this isn't gonna help you, all right? I don't care if it's whole grain, or 9 grain, or whatever the case, it's sugar, and it spikes insulin, which ends up causing disease. So, here's a slide. All the research proves this. This is not just a slide, there's actually research to back all of these. So, what does too much sugar cause? Metabolic syndrome, cardiovascular disease, tooth decay, allergies, dizziness, cholesterol problems, hypertension, colon and pancreatic cancer, type 2 diabetes, ADD and ADHD, obesity, hypoglycemia. So hypoglycemia, you're on the verge of diabetes is if you can only go a couple hours and then you feel like you're gonna die, like you get hangry, you're just so hungry, that's a problem. A healthy body should be able to move into fat burning so that you could go a little bit of time without eating. So that's just a little tidbit there. So fats. We have different types of fats. So we have saturated fat and unsaturated fat. And the saturated, this is a little bit of chemistry, but you can follow me here, I think. It's saturated because it's all single bonds. If you look at these carbons, they have one line. All right? So it's saturated. You get as many hydrogens on there as possible. An unsaturated fat has a double bond. And so, it's missing some hydrogens here, right? So, when you look at, can you see these?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you want to kill the lights so that you maybe see it better? Or can you see it fine? So, these are the 4 different types of fats. So, this is a saturated fat. So, it's saturated, this is like butter. So, butter, it tastes good at room temperature, it's all hard and sits on the table. And then this is a monounsaturated fat. So what that means, if you can see, it just has a double bond in one of these chains, right? So these are triglycerides. That's why it's called, if you've heard fat called triglycerides, it's because they're in these 3 chains. So this is a monounsaturated fat because just one of the chains has a double bond. This is a polyunsaturated fat. So this monounsaturated fat would be like olive oil. Really good for you. Polyunsaturated fats. Polyunsaturated fats are like safflower oil, sunflower oil, canola oil. These tend to be, well, for one, when they're heated during processing. So when you look at something that says canola oil, safflower oil, sunflower oil, you got to be thinking disease on that. So it usually drives heart disease. They're actually really healthy if they're not heated, but in our food, you go to the store, you go to Walmart, you go to Kroger, and you buy something that has safflower or sunflower oil, that is a heated oil, and it's going to cause problems. So we stay away from those. Olive oil is great, especially extra virgin olive oil. And then this is called a trans fat. So if you notice, the trans fat looks very similar to the saturated fat. So this is like margarine, hydrogenated vegetable oils, things like that. And so these trans fats look just like butter. They taste better than butter. They have a better shelf life, so which is why industry uses it, because it keeps food so it doesn't change. And so an example of these trans fats, if you get like fries from fast food and they fall into your car, you can sweep them out 5 years later and they look the exact same. A friend of mine put a Big Mac in his garage and it didn't even get mold on it. like 2 years down the road, it looked exactly the same. One of the preservatives that they use in those is trans fats, and trans fats are a disaster as far as cell function goes in disease. So they look like saturated fat, they taste better than saturated fat, but they are not, they're man-made. Our body is not used to processing them, and they're like plastic, they lodge in these cell membranes. So common foods with trans fats. Can you believe this? I mean, you know, researchers consider trans fats poison, but look at all these foods. Do you eat any of these foods? So bagels, I mean and I'll show you how to read those labels. Peanut butter, country crock. Country crock is margarine. So if you have those soft serve butters, those are margarine. Some of these processed foods, you have trans fats in pizza and pizza dough. You just read the labels. So I'll give you a second to look at those. So reading labels, and I'm going to show you how to read labels. So this is a good smooth artery. All right, and I'm guessing that most of you in the beginning said that you didn't want heart disease, right? So heart disease isn't random. I mean, it's not a genetic condition. It's due to chronic inflammation due to how we eat, think, and move. So this is a nice smooth artery. The inside is kind of like the inside of your cheek. It's really smooth, lets that blood go through, and should stay strong. Like, you know, when you exercise, you get those stronger, and it stays healthy. So this is an artery from trans fats. So when you have that real tasty peanut butter and you flip it over and it says partially hydrogenated vegetable oil, that's a problem. This is what you're getting. And that's a big part of the way, you know, kids eat and adults eat. They don't think it's any big deal. It wouldn't be on the market if it was dangerous. That's not true at all. Remember, of all the countries in the world, we're 42nd in terms of health, and our food is a big part of it. So how does this work? Well, these trans fats, so we have different toxins, right? Oops, forgot my eye. We have different toxins. So we talked about sugar, right? And then we have trans fats. And as I said before, when we're taking care of patients, these are two things we take care of, but we look at heavy metals, we look at plastics, we look at environmental stuff, where they work, things like that. But this is nutrition lecture, so these trans fats aren't like this fat. So this is all made there, it's a lipid bilayer, so there's these little fat cells. It looks like this, like over and over and over, right? So this is what this cell membrane looks like. And these nutrients pass through these channels, right? Well, a trans fat comes in here and it looks like this. It just lodges in the cell. It's like putting a piece of plastic right in the middle of the cell, and that ends up causing cell dysfunction and cell inflammation. And these fats that are so abundant in our food supply, especially if you eat processed foods, are tied with cancer, tied with diabetes, tied with heart disease. I mean, they cause these diseases. So how do you know if something has trans fats? Well, through processing, if it has vegetable oil, it could have trans fats in it. So if you look here though, the food industry they have guidelines, and then they figure out how to circumvent these guidelines. So some of the things they'll do is like lower the serving size so that they can say they have 0 trans fats. So there's all kinds, it's just a statistical manipulation. But if you look here, this says no trans fats, but we have partially hydrogenated vegetable oils and hydrogenated oils. So if you want to shorten your life, eat foods that, start with flour, sugar, so enriched flour is sugar, trans fats, sugar, trans fats, right? Look at the labels. If you see sugar and trans fats over and over in different forms, that's not a good thing. So, to review, remember, you have to take care of your cells if you want to be healthy. So the health of the cell, The health of the body is determined by the health of the cells, and the health of the cells are determined by the health of the cell membrane, and sugar and trans fats are huge disruptors of that cell membrane function, which in turn causes disease in our body. So just remember, procrastination is the thief of health. So oftentimes people are like, yeah, maybe next year I'll just really turn it on and get healthier. Why not now? If you start now, and believe me, I know because we deal with a lot of adults that have had the same habits since they were a kid, and it's very hard to change, especially when you have a sugar addiction, and those sugar triggers dopamine receptors in the brain stronger than cocaine. So when they've studied mice where they've given them options of, I think it was bread, sugar, and cocaine, and they chose the sugar over the cocaine. That's how strong this addiction is. So if you can start now in 7th grade, start eating lettuce wraps and vegetables and more than, sure you can have some bread and sugar here and there, but if you make it like an 80-20 rule where you're barely doing it, you're not even doing it every day, you might be doing it every 3 days or something like that, or maybe every 4, it's going to drastically change your outcomes later on in life. So procrastination is the thief of health, so do it now. And that's the end of our lecture. So if you have any questions, have Mr. Summer, you can ask Mr. Summer, you can email them to him, and then he can, or tell him, you guys can write them down and then email them to me, and then, if I get a list of questions, I'll just answer them on another video and send them to Mr. Summer, and then you'll get all those questions answered. See ya.